Dr. Mark Holder is a professor of psychology at UBC and is one of the leading researchers on the effect of spirituality on happiness. He wants to know, are kids that are exposed to spirituality happier or not? Well, I caught up with him in downtown Vancouver to find out the answer. Dr. Mark Holder, your study is really fascinating because you look at children, happiness, and spirituality. Explain what you did in your study.
Well, what we did was we measured happiness in a variety of different ways with children, and then we assessed their spirituality. And we did this through a series of questionnaires, and we assessed the children's happiness based on their own self-reports, as well as reports from their teachers and their parents.
Okay, and so you're looking at how happy they are, and is there a correlation between their happiness and spirituality?
Very clearly there is. What we found is that anywhere from 5 to 27% of a child's happiness can be explained by the child's spirituality. I mean, to put that in perspective, money explains less than 1%. So 5 to 27% is a whopping
What about in
big
adults?
effect.
What do we find in adults, just to give us a comparison?
In adults, it's actually less. It's about 4 to 5% across many different dimensions of spirituality explain our happiness as adults.
So are you saying then that the more kids are exposed to spirituality, and is there a difference between that and religion? I'll get to that in a second. The more they're exposed to spirituality, the happier they are?
Well, certainly as overall spirituality increases, and some of these subdomains, the components of spirituality increase, children are happier and happier.
Now, does that translate into religion? Because you're using the word spirituality, but that may not be religious, going to church and these kind of things. What's the difference between spirituality and religion?
Well, for us, we distinguish those very clearly, and it's very important to us to separate them out. So for us, spirituality is your inner belief system that you rely on for coping and for reducing stress and for comfort. Whereas religious practice is more of the institutional component of it. So it includes things like going to church, praying, and reading religious material. Dr.
Holder is a leading expert on what makes people happy. What he found was that the exposure to spirituality had a direct effect on the happiness of the kids he studied. You make this distinction between religion and spirituality. You're not necessarily saying then that doing religious activity increases happiness. You're saying spirituality increases happiness. So what does that mean then?
What it means is if you look at the different aspects of spirituality, things like personal relations, those involve love, community relations, your commitment, your connection to the community.
Which may be religious, because those have communities.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
We think of them as spiritual for sure, but these are overlapping concepts, as well as awe of nature, which is a little bit foreign sometimes for some people's idea of spirituality. But if you think of the Aboriginal population, certainly that respect and awe of nature is a key component of it.
One of your things that I know you were saying to me before is the difference between public and private schools, particularly faith-based schools. What have you found in kids that go to public schools versus private schools and happiness levels?
Well, we looked at both public and private, and in our area, private really means faith-based.
Okay.
So they get Christian teachings every day.
Yeah.
And with that, we found that the happiness levels of children from well, first, the children in general are quite happy.
Yeah.
But the children in public schools are actually happier than those in private schools.
Why would they be happier? Because that doesn't seem to make sense on the spirituality and according to your first study. What have you found then?
Well, I think the interesting component of it is that for the children in the private schools, they have more religious practice. And surprisingly, religious practice is negatively correlated with happiness. So that means that the children that go to church more regularly, that read Christian material more regularly, are actually less happy.
Wow, because you would think that because you're doing religious practices that you'd be happier because it goes spiritual. You're saying, why? Is it because they're being forced to do them? Is that maybe why?
Well, we think that's part of it, because if you look at adults, religious practice is positively linked to happiness. So why did it get reversed for the children? And I think that's exactly right. For children, we're looking at 8 to 12-year-olds. For the 8 to 12-year-olds, if you go to church, it's pretty much because your parents have decided that you're going to church and which church you're going to. Whereas, same with young teenagers. Whereas things that you could do more on your own volition, like praying or meditating, those are the things more positively linked to happiness.
Welcome back. Dr. Holder's research is groundbreaking. He found a connection between spirituality and happiness in kids. But what was absolutely shocking to me was that formal religious training by itself did not produce happiness. Listen to this.
People that are watching, how can they help their kids become spiritual people without necessarily becoming too religious, because that's going to lower their happiness level? So how do you do that? What would you suggest?
I think there's different ways you can do that. One of the ways you can do that is a big part of spirituality involves personal meaning. So if we can enhance personal meaning.
What do you mean by that, personal meaning?
Personal meaning is the idea that your life has some purpose, maybe greater than yourself. It may involve things like hope, and it may involve your contribution to things outside your own self-interest. So, for example, acts of kindness. Simply counting your acts of kindness at the end of every day enhances personal meaning.
So you could sit down around the table, Dr. Holder, with your kids and say, hey, what are 2 or 3 acts of kindness you did every day?
That's exactly it. So rather than simply saying, how did school go today, or how was your day at work, dear, the classic lines we use, and I think a better approach, or an additional good approach, would be to ask the child, what are kind things you did? And not just ask the child, everybody in your household. And it could be as simple as picking up litter to help the community. It could be as simple as holding the door open for somebody whose arms are filled with groceries.
But you're saying to me, recalling that or recollecting that with kids, either being thankful or doing acts of kindness, that is going to increase the happiness in them.
Yes, it does. You don't have to actually even change your behavior. All you have to do is be aware of it, count it at the end of the day. And what happens for children like that, we think, is that they go out into the world and they look for different dimensions, different aspects where they can contribute acts of kindness. And that by itself seems to promote happiness.
Dr. Holder, your study is so fascinating. I look forward to when it's going to be completed, because you obviously have some few more things to keep going on.
You bet.
Thanks a lot for chatting with us today.
My
I really
pleasure.
enjoy it.
I appreciate your interest in our research.